Welcome to the ATX DAO Podcast, the hub for exploring the forefront of blockchain technology in Austin's Web3 community. We connect you with innovators within ATX DAO and beyond as we venture into the world of decentralized technology. So crack open a beer and join us for a front row seat to learn about the innovations and trends shaping our digital future. This is the ATX DAO Podcast. Well, welcome to the ATX DAO Podcast. We are excited to welcome Marvin and Vardo with us from Maestro. Welcome, guys.
Hey, thank you.
Yeah, glad to have you guys on the show, and you're in person, so it's nice to do an in-person one as well.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, we got all the team to actually come, so it's not just us; it's like the entire team coming out here. It's been a fun week.
Yeah, I mean, you guys were saying in the recorded part of the show, like we were like, you guys are going to go clay shooting on Saturday. Like, who do you think? I mean, let's start off with who do you think is going to shoot someone? Who do you think is going to horribly miss and be like, oh my God, I'm not standing anywhere fucking close to them when they're shooting?
I think it's the Brit.
Really?
Yeah, I don't trust him.
Shit.
He's too smart, man.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
I think it's the Ukrainian, but
Yeah.
That guy went fucking wild last night.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
he lives in Vegas now, so
Wow.
He led everyone astray.
Literally.
Yeah. We had to. I mean, would you guys get home at 3 a.m. or 4 a.m. or something?
Yeah, unfortunately, yeah.
He
Holy
met a girl named Darcy. He invited him. Yeah, she was
in
a taco spot. Yeah. Yeah. We have a wild team. We have an unhinged team. I don't know how we get anything done.
It's really funny because like when I think of Maestro, I think of like, even when I think of YouTube, I think of like some of the most adults that I've ever met in my adulting life. And it seems like when you look underneath the hood, you're like, it's just complete chaos as well. It's really funny how that kind of balance works out. But these guys are putting on a good, I've not seen anyone like pee on the floor yet. No one's punched each other. There's no pass outs. There's no heroin anywhere in there. But like that being said, pretty tame guys.
I mean, the crypto industry, to be an adult, the bar is really low, right?
Yeah, that's
true. That's true.
We are an insane industry made of like insane people.
Yes.
And that's actually a brand. Like if you're not a little bit crazy, right, and you're in blockchain, people are like, there's something. Like
Yes.
I don't know what it is yet, but you're not in crypto and you're a normal person. Those things don't.
The American Psycho kind of analogy, right? Like two put together for something to not break, I guess.
So is that what you thought about us? You're like, you know what? They're cool, the adults, but like, at some point they're gonna crack, and I'm gonna figure out what's their deal.
It is really funny to like have this balance of like characters on a team, bringing them together, and they're so focused on this mission. And like infrastructure, by and large, is like one of those things. It's like it's not like a surface level product. It's not something that's sexy or sellable. It's something that's like you have to do the work, and it has to work, and that speaks to us. So
Yeah, I think we wear that on our sleeves. Like I always say, like what we do is not sexy. Like Maestro is boring, but boring means trustworthy.
Yeah.
It means reliable.
Yeah.
It means it's there when you need it,
Yeah.
right? And we don't need to play on the hype and play on the marketing and be external facing or oversell ourselves, right?
Yeah.
We provide the foundation. It's like the foundation of a building structure, right? Of a skyscraper is we don't want the guy that's like laying down the cement, right? To be an artist. So you just want a guy that does it well every time, consistent. And so that's what Maestro is. We abstract away the complexity of running this infrastructure backend for our customers, and then we let them like sleep at peace that it's just going to be running 24/7, whatever happens.
Yeah.
And we take on that burden, keep that alive and uptime. And I think when you build that trust with the customer, it's actually very rewarding because they are extremely grateful. They know that without us, right, it's like we would not be able to run this application. So we get to, I think probably that's the best part of Maestro and my job is the relationship you build with the business. Right? So although you're not front facing, you get to know the founders and the dev team and see their journey, right? So at the beginning, the app is like tiny, it's in testnet. I mean, I've seen with you guys, right? And then you're experimenting, you're iterating, and then you finally launch. That's a big deal. And it's a bit of like a success for us as well. It's like, oh my God, like they finally launched. And then you see them grow and succeed. And so you get to like, it's like a mom sending her child out to like college. Yeah. You feel a little bit like it's like secondhand success for these companies.
The Messiah complex is coming in. No, he's absolutely right. Yeah, it's honestly like we feel there's so much chaos in the projects that use us. We feel like we're like kind of like an anchor, you know, because they're building very like experimental, revolutionary stuff that's like changing the way we interact with money and finance. In the end of the day, like our platform needs to be like reliable, secure, and stable.
Yeah.
So there's a lot of like friction between us and other teams, but in a good kind of friction. So yeah, like you said, we're playing a very key role, and it just continues to the responsibilities continue to grow.
Absolutely. So I know we've had y'all on the show a couple of times. So Vardo, this is your third episode. So I think you might be our most number of episodes on the show. So congratulations for that.
Where's my money?
Right. Exactly. But just in case folks haven't heard the previous episodes, do y'all want to just give a quick rundown of what Maestro is, what y'all do, and then we can kind of dig into some of the exciting stuff that y'all have going on?
Yeah, for sure. So, in short, Maestro is a blockchain infrastructure provider. People know a lot, maybe like Alchemy or QuickNode, the EVM side of things, where 80-90% of all dApps run on Alchemy. Right? They don't want to run the infrastructure themselves or running the nodes by RPC provider or API provider. And so then they can focus their efforts on the application itself, the application logic, the user experience, and they don't have to like maintain this complex infrastructure. In a way, it's similar to what you see in Web 2 with like AWS, Google Cloud. Tech companies don't run their own servers in their office, right? Everything is run in the cloud. You're basically renting these computers, run your entire business. Netflix's entire streaming service runs on AWS server. And they'd rather just focus on the user experience and making. And it's the same thing is happening in Web3, right? You're creating these layers of abstractions where now people want to build these applications, and then we get to specialize in running compute heavy and data heavy data processing, and then we allow you to scale elastically, right? So you could start off with a wallet with a few hundred users, and then suddenly your wallet grows to 1 million users. If you had to build your own infrastructure, it may just kind of like implode in itself, and you would have to rebuild everything. So it scales to 1 million users. By using infra providers like Maestro, you can 10x your volume, and we have this capacity, right, to scale with your need. So you save time, you save money, and you can scale. And then the last thing I would say is Maestro is focusing on what we call like UTXO blockchains. So there's two main kind of like blockchain designs out there. There's EVM, which was pioneered by Ethereum, and then UTXOs, which was pioneered by Bitcoin, but is also used in Dogecoin, in Cardano. And so that's kind of our niche, and our competitive advantage is we've built everything from scratch to be really tailored to the challenges and the difficulties of building on UTXO blockchain. So we always say like we have probably the state-of-the-art UTXO indexing kind of technology under the hood that powers all our services. And then our end consumers are apps that you use on crypto. So wallets are very popular, DEXs, lending protocols, NFT marketplace. All of these kind of like verticals in blockchain would be our customers.
Okay, so that's a pretty broad, sweeping thing. I mean, you've said some really interesting things. It's like, I guess M is the constant, right? It's like your culture, right? Like Maestro is the constant. And then you cater into like so many different things here. I would like to know, like, how did Maestro start? Like, most people don't come to this thesis in the beginning, right? Like, what was that beginning for you guys? And how did you guys meet? Please tell me it's not through a Hinge date as well, where someone else said Vardo is their cousin. I'd be like, that's just too brutal.
Yeah, we were co-workers in a biotech company. So that was a lot of fun. And it was also very exciting work. We were doing early cancer detection. And so we're running these huge models on DNA sequences and predict early signs of cancer. And I was part of like the ML team. I was part of the bioinformatics team. It was very cross-disciplinary. It was very cutting edge, very impressive people in the company. We were actually training some of the first models that could like detect types of cancers. And the model that we built is actually right now going through FDA approval and it's done its clinical trial. And so that's really, so I think we've always been interested in more like cutting edge or like innovative part of technology, but also willing to like completely switch, right? So going from biotech to blockchain is really a 360. Yeah. But the common thread is it's exciting, it's an emerging industry, emerging technology, and there's so many low-hanging fruit, right? And I think in all those emerging economy, you have all these opportunities. And I think Maestro, I think the best companies is when you don't want to build a company. It's almost like the company comes to you. And I think that's what happened in the origin of Maestro is, I mean, I never thought I would start a company, honestly. We just got interested in blockchain. We started looking into it. And so the first thing you do more, like we came from the technical side, is let's run a node, right? The first steps in blockchain is let's run a validator node. See what happens. We started with a stake pool on Cardano and run it, and then realized that other people need help with running their validators. Let's help them and launch and then manage their stake pool and their validators. And then people were like, hey, we'll pay you for this, right? So next thing you know, now we're just providing this hosted service for nodes. And then it just grew organically where we're like, okay, well, we're seeing more and more need for these types of services where people need help running that infrastructure, need help getting on-chain data. And so Maestro kind of moved really naturally. And then at some point, we're like, I guess we'll have to make this a company. And then we just quit our jobs and just went full throttle onto that. It's been, a journey, and we definitely had our struggles. We went through a brutal bear market, right? And I think we just came out even stronger. And I think now Maestro have never been better.
I gotta ask, in your 2025 bingo card, was Cardano being in the strategic reserve even remotely on that? Did you ever think that even in your biotech time or when you started this, bro, Cardano is going to be on there would even be a strategic reserve and Cardano's in it? I gotta ask because it's like it's the news as of last week.
Technically, it's in the stockpile.
Okay,
not in the reserve.
Okay, sorry.
I don't know.
I'm sorry. But like, that has got to be. I mean, the next question we have here is like milestones. I'm like, this is one of those things. It's just like so out of left curve. I gotta ask, like, would you have ever even thought of that future, that version of the simulation you're in?
I mean, Bitcoin itself is in the reserve. That's unbelievable. I think we've normalized it so quickly, but like the world power, the US is stacking Bitcoin and promised not to sell it. So they're basically saying on paper, we're going to diamond hand Bitcoin. Yeah. That's absolutely insane. And I think the gears are turning, the dominoes are falling, and it's only going to accelerate. And then that random tweet of like just pointing out specifically for cryptos as well, that was definitely surprising. We'll see if it's how serious that is. But I think right now we're very focused on Bitcoin. We're like super excited about the potential of like what Bitcoin can do, like enterprises and institutions working with it, and the fact that we got the government chilling Bitcoin now is a great place to be.
Yeah, I gotta also ask, as also a fellow founder, like what are some milestones that are maybe NSFW milestones or like personal milestones for you two as founders? Like I'll share one of my NSFW milestones with Rashad. Rashad used to live in Denver, and it was hilarious. He had this inflatable couch, like inflatable bed that he had. And he was like, bro, come to Denver. We were starting our company at the time or whatever. This was ETH Denver last year. For some reason, I completely forgot about this thing. And he had this terrible fucking like fold out couch. It was the worst fucking thing ever. It looked like the person who would sleep on that thing was like 5'1", right? And I passed, you know how it is in Denver, you're going hard every single day. You come back, you're exhausted. I would pass out on this thing. And one of my distinct memories was that like towards the end of ETH Denver, we finished all our goals. He finally was like, he opened up his closet and I saw the inflatable couch and I was like, bro, what the fuck? And the last night before I left ETH Denver, I slept on that couch. It was like one of these weird founder memory milestones that I will never forget with Rashad. I'm wondering, it has nothing to do with the company, but it comes with the bond, right? The story that is there. I'm wondering for you two as founders, what are those weird, NSFW, like behind the scenes milestones that you two had together while building Maestro? And I'd love to hear the public ones also.
There's so many, yeah. I mean,
actually, we have an inflatable bed involved. He slept on my inflatable mattress 4 or 5 times visiting Austin. This is the first time he's in an Airbnb.
What?
And that's because we have a team here with us. So we have a very similar story.
Yeah.
Actually, Marvin slept more on that thing than anyone else combined. So congratulations.
Wow. That's kind of cool.
And that's, very tough discussions and just like butting heads and getting across it, just building a good friendship, just making sure we're on the same page.
Yeah.
There's so many.
We drove recently past a hotel where we stayed there. I think we were visiting Austin.
Yeah, when we first I hadn't moved here.
So
yeah.
I saw from the street like this pool on this rooftop, and we're like, hey, like 3-4 years ago, we were at this same hotel.
Yeah.
We hadn't moved to Austin. We're just starting Maestro,
Yeah.
and it just brought us back to like just the beginning of Maestro, just in that pool.
Yeah.
That was almost 4 years ago.
Yeah, yeah.
Crazy.
Just talking about Maestro and all our ideas, and then like fast forward 4 years, you live here, you've got an amazing community, you're like settled, you got a house, and Maestro as like a team. And so I think that moment for me of driving by that pool was like kind of the great kind of like closing the loop.
That's awesome. Okay, then what are the things that your public, boring investors would like to hear? These are the milestones we'll say for the public.
Well, actually, I think the reason this works is because Marvin and I are very like, we have really good bullshit detectors.
Okay, good.
And in this space, there's a lot of bullshit. And so just being very real about what's actually possible, what's feasible. I mean, we're building an infrastructure company, so we have to be really good at like filtering out things that are just hype. Sometimes the hype is okay. Like sometimes we have to like take that into account, but just like saying no to like potential like big wins or whatever, or at least, and just deciding that we're going to stick to our like foundations and like stick to the fundamental principles.
Yeah.
I mean, we had to both be that way for this to last as long as it did.
Yeah.
And why we're like that, I think similar upbringing maybe, or just like similar like characteristics. But because of those similarities, we also have butt heads and like had difficult discussions, which we've come across, but lots and lots of those kinds of examples. That's but awesome. Nothing can get in the way of this anymore. Like,
that's awesome.
It has to be some drastic universal meteor hitting the earth type of thing for this not to work.
Okay. Well, that's awesome.
And that's not a romantic statement.
With all that time in the inflatable bed, I don't mean, let's not put romance out of the question. Anything could happen. But he could Armenian cousin you as well. He could be like, hey,
he has to convert. It's like
a
process.
But if you want to bring it back to milestones.
Yes. What is your public milestones that you feel like in your mind, you'd been like, this is a big moment for our company?
Yeah.
So
I think 2024 was all about the product.
Yeah.
Right. So we're building and refining the product to have this like product market fit. I'm pretty proud of what we have right now. Well, I would say we probably have the most advanced like Bitcoin infrastructure services market. You have this suite of product that really covers all your bases. That was kind of like the big challenge and the milestone of last year. This year, the milestone is growth, right? So now it's like, how do you grow this business? How to really like scale the usage and customer? And we're dividing it into like 3 categories. So the first categories is our first customers that we have a lot of right now is projects like yourself, right? Like small startups, DeFi projects that are building on Bitcoin, on Doge, and need an infra provider, right?
Yeah.
But often these are small teams, of a couple people. Many a time the application hasn't launched yet, right? And then we're slowly growing into like bigger established DeFi projects like wallets and DEXs. But now the second category is we're working with also Bitcoin Layer 2s. So you're going to see in the next 3 months to 6 months, a flurry of new Bitcoin Layer 2 coming onto the ecosystem. They're going to play even a bigger role than what you see on Ethereum, because at least on Ethereum on L1, you have this full smart contracts functionality. But on Bitcoin, you are limited. So you can still build DEXs and lending protocols that are trustless. But people are looking for that extra level of programmability. I think a lot of exciting innovations for Bitcoin are going to happen in the Bitcoin L2 build roll-ups. And we get to work with these teams like from inception, right? They're building it, they're in testnet, we're going to be launch partners from day one. And we're doing that across multiple L2s. And so that's really cool because we get to help launch these L2s off the ground. And the way we benefit them is like we now have an ecosystem of developers. We have over 1,000 developers on our platform that by integrating into an L2, then now we bring all these developers to start using that L2 out of the box and start building. So it's a great way for them to improve their user adoption and also create the developer experience that developers expect now to go into an L2, right? It's like developers are a bit like the pretty girls in the club, right? There's just never enough of them. And so all the L2s are fighting for the same devs, and they all be like, hey, come to my L2, you'll get this, you'll get that, right? And one big thing is like, how do you create the good developer experience to like make people incentivize them to build there? So that's where we find like a lot of good partnerships that are like And then we get to become a validator as well. So we run validators in their networks. Also, we get part of like actually census securing the Delta at the infrastructure level. We become kind of an integral part of the entire ecosystem. And then the third category, which I think is the most exciting and is a new market that wasn't possible before, even on Ethereum, is now the adoption of financial institutions, banks, hedge funds, traditional money. They just couldn't play in that game in the past because it was just illegal, right? You have a banking license, you cannot custody crypto until this year. Now you can. And so now you have this new market that is opening up, and you can be sure that all these banks and these financial institutions will have a blockchain budget and will need to experiment with blockchains like, hey, what can we do to augment our platform and extend our services to our millions of users and with billions of dollars? And we've been talking about blockchain for years, and now we can finally, dip our toes and offer some kind of products. And it could be as simple as stable coins, right? Or we'll be able to save in Bitcoin instead of save in fiat. And they're going to look for vendors, right? They're not going to hire a Bitcoin team and build everything from scratch. They're just too big and they just don't know enough, right? So the first thing they're going to do is they're going to look around and who are the infra providers that have the technology and the tooling to give us kind of that extra functionality. And so we're aggressively kind of looking at those. And I think this would be a great deal.
Yeah, no, that's huge. I think to your point, I think a lot of the times the larger banks going to do, they're not going to build that internal. They're definitely going to look to hire vendors that can do that. So I think
one of the cool things I want to say, and I think this is also really unique, in all my experience in crypto, I think y'all were the first team that not only took a chance on us, because it was like, we are doing something highly unconventional, right? But also thought about things as look at things as hey, let's add value almost like a VC does in an L1. Let's help the L1. Let's help the protocol level on a financial level. Let's think about infrastructure, and let's holistically build everything up. And you guys have naturally now expanded that with the incubator stuff that you guys are doing, the developers, and obviously providing the feeds, and also thinking about it from a business point of view. Guys, we need to be holistic about this and think of it as we're building an ecosystem. That's rare. Most people don't think that way. It is a good business point.
We've got also incredible data on usage. And so I'm waiting the day for VCs to come talk to us and say, hey, what is the usage of this application? Yeah. Right? Because all these applications are trying to raise funds and sell the dream. But we get to see exactly what's going on under the hood and if that app is actually being used at all. And so we get to see before anyone else, even when apps become successful, instantly we see on our dashboard the usage and the volume going up. So we also have just in terms of insights or trends, we're able to see in real time where the volume and where the traffic is going. Maybe one DEX starts losing traffic and then suddenly you see this other DEX picking up. So we're not using that data for anything, but it's a cool amount of information.
No, I mean, we are somewhat using that data. You're talking about our metrics, right?
I mean, not to invest in companies.
Oh, no.
Oh,
yeah, you're right. Never mind.
No, but I have this, it's interesting that you're choosing to go. So I have a little bit of a different thesis with your institutional vision. And I think that a lot of institutionals will just simply have enough money to just throw at a problem that they'll just be I'm just going to learn to build this ourselves, right? But I could be wrong. But I also think that it's interesting that you chose this rather than the agentic route. I'm surprised that, did you guys ever consider that as the next evolution of Maestro's growth itself? Where if we're coming into an era of agents, I wonder if agents need data to make parameterized decisions. Is that what you envision, or has people talked to you about that, or am I just
we talk about agents every day?
All right, there we go.
How can you not to? It's fascinating. I think it's a bit hard to make long-term bets because space is moving so quickly. Definitely, I think there is something very special with data that we have. We're brainstorming, we're searching, we're trying stuff. And I don't think we have a clear vision, but it's definitely in the cards for my.
So this is the after hours thing that you're really behind the scenes. This is the deep state for the deep state.
It's the meta protocol of the meta protocol.
I like it.
Well, we are trying to figure out how to make our platform as easily accessible by agents as possible. right? Like, how do we have all of the different protocols and interfaces in place? And then as far as like us, let's say having agents ourselves or like having like managing agents, it's really hard to say like how we can play a role there. But like making our data very easily accessible by agents is a very important priority for us.
Okay. Is that one of the things that you would say is like your goals for 2025 is growth, right? Expansion into new markets, it seems like, and new customer bases. Is this one of those things where you think that, hey, this is also 2025 outside of the institutional vibe, we want to get Cyberdyne systems up?
Yeah, absolutely. I think so. The main interface for all of Maestro's data is simple REST APIs, right? So it's a standard programming agnostic way to get data, right? Any language can use it. API is not going to go away, but maybe what's changing is who's going to call the API, right? Is it going to be a human coding a backend and then integrating with our APIs, or is it going to be a set of agents that say, hey, I want to know what are the top trading NFTs in the past hour on Bitcoin? We have that data, right? Yeah. It's only a few queries away. So that agent that already knows how to talk to Maestro's agent and just say, hey, I'm looking for that information. And then our agents just calls all our endpoints, aggregates it, and runs that, right? So then now we're getting volume, not just from like applications and programmers, but now we're getting agent volume from like all these agents that have questions about data, and we can be kind of like that data lake source. Yeah. And so that's what Varderes was mean. Like, how do we don't need necessarily to build an entire new application. It's like, how do we make it as easy as possible for these new agents and these agents frameworks to plug into our data source and abstract it?
Another thing with the kind of agent AI side is like, how do we make it as easy as possible for developers to build Bitcoin-based applications leveraging AI, right? So how do we meet them as close as possible to their like starting point? And then where does Maestro play a role in like helping them go from idea to deployed application as fast as possible? Integrating our data or like building the applications around it, data retrieval, querying, interacting with the chain, and then there's the building something. And we're trying to look at both of those things.
You want to expedite vibe code, basically.
Yeah, yes.
That's kind of unique. I think that's a very interesting kind of era that we're like infrastructure companies are like looking at it. And I feel like being small, nimble, and like also just like ready to embrace the future is kind of special. Shown that the business logic is there, right? Which is like we're willing to take and look at things in an unconventional way, but have a conventional culture in a way of like being professional about it, and just taking out these risks. I gotta ask also, like like you mentioned all the good stuff, right? What was some of the, if you don't feel like sharing it, like I completely understand, but I gotta also ask as a founder, dude, what was like one of the biggest obstacles for y'all as founders and as a company? Did anything like, if there's another founder listening to this and they only took away this thing, what would share that obstacle and be like, how did you guys?
Yeah, I think we can both answer different. There are tons of things, but maybe one that comes to mind is pivoting, right? So pivoting and updating the mission is, you get emotionally attached to a certain mission and you really believe in it, but the market is brutal, right? And the market is always right. And so if you're not willing to take that feedback from the market, then you're just going off in the wrong direction. Unless you have very, very strong conviction that the market will eventually come back around, right? So we did make a really big bet on UTXO chains, which definitely was uncool and not standard in 2020. Everyone was crazy about EVM, and EVM had this incredible growth. But we stuck with UTXOs, and we thought there was something special there and kind of a niche that we can build and expertise. And I think right now we're one of the biggest experts when it comes to UTX indexing. But we also started on Cardano. And Cardano had this very like scientific and very like engineering and first principle approach, which we really liked as people that worked in science and technical fields. And so for a long time, we were very, very committed to Cardano and we learned a lot. But one of the biggest unlock was actually us pivoting and focusing on Bitcoin. And that really kind of like, it was a quantum leap for us in terms of able to raise more, grow the team and grow the product. But everything we learn on Cardano is extremely useful on Bitcoin. So it's like, we never gave up on UTXOs, but we did shift the chains. As a founder, it's always like these critical decisions of like, what do you stick with as your core convictions, and you kind of like push it through until it succeeds, and what part of that vision actually needs to be updated and moved. And that's sometimes what will lead you to that next kind of leap in the company.
Very cool. So just kind of thinking about that. So I am interested in kind of the reason for choosing UTXO. Cardano, is that was your first chain, but what was the reason to start there, and kind of what attracts y'all to UTXOs?
I think Cardano was just a cool. First, it was just pure curiosity, right? They're the first. Till this day, they're the first blockchain that managed to build Turing complete smart contracts natively on UTXOs. Everyone else is using the EVM way of doing smart contracts, and so we thought, okay, well, that's kind of cool. Like, Bitcoin is UTXOs, Bitcoin is the OG chain, and UTXOs has actually a lot of like great properties. It's much more secure, much more deterministic. So there are things you can do like lightning channels for lightning payments, right? Is only possible on Bitcoin and UTXO chains. It's not possible on EVM. Another one is because the transactions are much more predictable than EVM. It's actually, I think people talk a lot about ZK, zero knowledge proof, for scaling or for privacy. Hundreds of millions of dollars have been spent trying to make ZK work with EVM. But fundamentally, I think EVM and ZK are not compatible really, because EVM is an account-based model, but it executes, it's like real-time execution. So you can never predict what will be the state of the blockchain when a transaction executes. You can never actually build a proof that is stable. And the whole point of ZK is be able to prove the state of the chain and then do the computation of chain. And Bitcoin, Cardano, and these UTXO chains transactions are like extremely deterministic, and so it makes ZK integration significantly simpler. And you're able to like create ZK rollups and ZK scaling with much less complexity. It's more streamlined. On EVM, you need to have these like complex sequences that reorder the transaction. It's like this Frankenstein of a solution that tries to like fit a peg into a round hole, right? But I think maybe Bitcoin could actually leapfrog a lot of the rollup kind of work on EVM, because its UTXO kind of design is much more tailored to like case scaling. Yes. And so I thought, till this day, I think UTXOs have ways to just do things that EVM can't, and vice versa, right? So there are many things that EVM does that UTXO cannot. And that's why it's been so hard to build DeFi on Bitcoin. It's just because EVM is so great at so many things. So it's more of a trade-off. I think both can coexist, but I think they will specialize in different things, and they'll be good at like different things.
Awesome.
That's pretty cool.
Yeah. So I did have another question. So y'all mentioned a little bit earlier that you're working with the Bitcoin L2s, which I think for several of those, they use different virtual machines for those. How does it work for those? And maybe it's just me not knowing how that all works, but how does it work for y'all to like index like an Arch or something like that builds kind of with a combination of the two?
So we do it all. So although we specialize in UTXO indexing, we are currently indexing EVM, SVM, so Solana accounts. As an infra provider, I think we've accepted that we're going to be like multi-chain, and we'll need to also be able to support all these VMs. So over time, actually, we've kind of run all of these. So yeah, a lot of the Bitcoin L2 VM are EVM based, and so we're running EVM indexer, EVM RPC.
Nice.
Who's your favorite Bitcoin L2?
That's a trap.
It's a fair. I never said it's not a fair question. It's an unfair question, but it's a question I asked. I mean, okay, who's your favorite one on Vibes? You must meet a lot of developer teams and culture, right, around each of these people.
Dojo S.
Dojo S is their favorite Bitcoin L2. I like the answer. Shout out to Jordan and Alex.
To be honest, it's the Wild West right now, right? So most L2s haven't even launched, right? And many L2s are still like raising funds. So you have the first version of L2s, like Rootstock or Stacks, which I think are the furthest along in terms of maturity. But they've struggled a little bit with that adoption and that volume, and they're working hard on that. And then now you have these new versions of L2 that are coming, like Bob and BitLayer and many others that seem to also have like more adoption. Building L2 is not just like tech; it's also creating the vibe, creating the ecosystem. How do you bring people on, right? So you have to be extremely good at like marketing, growth, BD, and kind of like create an ecosystem out of nothing. And I feel like there's even like third categories of L2s, like Arch Network, which are trying to blur the line between an L2, and they actually don't even call themselves an L2. And it allows you to basically just run a smart contract on the L2, but then always bridge back within the same block. So your assets never are like wrapped and bridged in the L2 for more than a block. It's just you bridge in, you do some computation, and you bridge back so that everything settles back on Bitcoin after every block. Right? So if anything happens to the L2, there's no your funds are not at risk. And it creates this like nice experience where kind of abstracting the chain completely, because they're just logging in with their Bitcoin wallet. From their perspective, they're just signing a Bitcoin transactions, but that Bitcoin transactions actually has an intent that is then executes a contract on the L2, creates the state transition, and then brings them back on L1, so that it creates this, not illusion, but like it creates this like sense of like, I've never really bridged anything, and I'm paying my fees in stats, right? And I think a lot of people have learned the lessons of what's happened on EVM L2s, where do people want to bridge everything? Do they want to pay gas with a different token? You know, like we want to really fragment the ecosystem in between L1 and L2. So they're trying to kind of bring a more kind of unified experience. And so I'm also very excited about these types of Bitcoin L2s, but they haven't launched. Time will tell, what people think.
Yeah, shout out to Matt and Amin. We had them on our show. Their Peekaboo architecture is a very interesting architecture. They're good guys. Yeah, I mean, like you said, there's a lot of interesting, exciting L2s that are coming about. We asked about this culture thing. I got to ask also, I had a chance to meet with your team earlier. We were kind of riffing about that earlier, right? I was wondering, we've talked a lot about the product. We've talked a lot about your vision. You guys, tell me about your team. Tell me about the goblins in the basement.
We have a very high bar for entry into the company, in all seriousness. We take that very seriously. Marvin mentioned actually the most important thing. You guys asked about founders earlier, and how emotional detachment in a way, and being able to pivot, and keeping your emotions away from important decisions. So I think number two, that's very much number one as well in my eyes. Number two is who you bring into the company. We have a high bar for success, and we really convey that during our interviews, and we search far and wide to find the best possible people for the team. So they're all kind of weird in their own way, but they're super talented and ambitious, and they care about the mission, and the engineers are super brilliant. I mean, every day I'm just very much impressed by the suggestions they make, the contributions they make to the code, and just the ideas they have for how to improve the product and the platform. So, and then just to kind of summarize that, we want to hire people that are much more talented than us, that are really good at something. What do they bring to the table that we don't have, that we won't ever have? And how can they tell us what to do, and how we can improve? Yeah, I'm very grateful for the team, but the trade-off there is that it's extremely difficult to find a team like that. It takes time. You have to be patient. You want to grow and you want to find someone because you're falling behind on a product, but you have to sometimes say no to someone because they weren't the right fit,
Oh yeah, it is really funny. I was half joking, but I was dead serious. Before even the pod started, Vardo had the chance to introduce me to some of your team, and me and Vardo would do walk and talks. And one of the often things, I love walk and talks, right? It's kinetic energy, and it's also neural energy to sync up, especially when you get a chance to talk to people that really are passionate about what they want to do and ideas and stuff, right? So Vardo and me went on a walk and talk, and one of the biggest topics I think that keeps coming up in the walk and talks was team and culture, and then growing it, and then understanding what skill sets are, how to get more out of people. One of the things that is really funny, and this is how you can tell about people caring about people. It's he would talk about all the good things that are there and how to not make himself bad. And really, this is a PSA for Vardo. So if there is a lady out there on Hinge that listens to us, no, but
I thought you were getting someone.
It's true. I mean, look, I didn't want to give you too much signal. Basically, what I'm saying is that it's rare for founders to actually want to get the best out of their people and then have them be better than them, right? You're like want them to do better than you. And it's kind of cool that you guys are doing that. You have that in your core company culture, and your team realizes that, and you're recruiting in that kind of manner. I mean, it seems like that's a winning company culture, right? Like you need that at its core to make that special.
Yeah, and I want to add to that. Like, I think the reason we have such a good engineering team is really the testament to Varderes. Like he has, like you said, he has a very high bar, and he has his obsession with like execution. Number of time he's come to me and say like, how do I get more out of the team? How can we execute more? How can we increase how we operate and just squeeze more out of what we have? Because we actually, and maybe it's because of our past at Maestro, like Maestro was so close to bankruptcy, and during the bear market, we even had to like let people go, reduce their salaries. That was a really tough decision to make. And so we built Maestro in a highly constrained and scarce environment. And so it forces us to like, how do we squeeze everything we can out of what we have? And now we're able to raise funds and grow the team. We maintain that obsession with like executing and squeezing the most out of the team. And so although we're a small team, actually when I talk to investors or other people, they're shocked how small of a team we are, because from the outside, they're like, this must be a 20-person team to it, right? And we're able to do much less. And yeah, it's a big testament to like Vardo's leadership.
Yeah, I mean, it's not giving too much praise. Let's say something mean about Vardo. The next 5 minutes has to be just something mean about Vardo.
No, I would also add, I mean, now that we're stroking each other, No, honestly, the way that it meets Marvin halfway with his obsession with like product and customer satisfaction, making really good things, being extremely detail oriented, wanting to make the customers happy. With my obsession with like efficiency and like execution, I think we're really lucky to have the team we have,
That's kind of sweet. It seems like you guys shower together. No, but like it's cool, right? Because like as a founder, you guys like helped provide, you're a partner for us that's an infrastructure provider. So during that case, it's kind of like the closest thing you can understand, like working with someone else without like directly working in that company, right? So you like kind of get the vibe. You're like, okay, this is the way these people work. And funnily, seeing your team now, seeing all the people and seeing you guys grow, it's like, yeah, you get to see that. And you realize those things only when you do those things, right? Like you're only up close, and you kind of like, you got to go on a few dates with the person to really understand what this person's like, right? Just don't, it's like the first date doesn't mean anything. Like, so that's kind of cool. Seeing that with you too, it's kind of special. I just think it's a special moment we're all having here.
One thing maybe I'd like to add is, I think the nature of building companies is completely changing. The way the org chart of a typical enterprise is being switched upside down. Right? And I think us as founders, especially in blockchain, we are at the forefront of like what I call like enterprise 2.0, companies 2.0. And we've worked actually in bigger companies, startups, went from like 35 to 400, and you see this increase in bloat, right? Middle managers after middle managers, meeting after meeting, the sake of process. And then you see kind of like speed of execution, kind of like really grind out. And it was so crushing to see like so much of like talent being wasted on like just bureaucracy, right? Yeah. And we, in the age of Doge, like same thing happens in companies. And, like company like Stripe has like 10,000 employees, and Stripe is doing great, right? But do they need 10,000 employees? Like they could do it for like a fraction of that. And I think especially now with like the tools that we have with LLMs and all these like the maturity of like the software development journey, I think we can cut a lot of that extra layer of bureaucracy. Like even like HR software, right? Or like accounting, like all of that can be like done through vendors or automated. And so I think the beauty is now we're able to build a team that is extremely flat, extremely like kind of like very low latency between an idea from one person to the next. And it doesn't need to bubble up and have hours of brainstorming session. And I think we are at the forefront of the blockchain of like these new companies that could become billion-dollar companies, but it's like 15, 20 people.
Right? Yeah. So like, I'd love to hear a little bit more about that, if that's okay. The section of like, okay, so there's an idea. One of your engineers that I've bullpen out here come in and they say, guys, I have this idea to like do this. I think it might work on this this epic or this sprint that we have here, but I don't really know. And how do you take that idea and then work with it? Like, is it kind of like, hey, this is one of those things where it's like, I want you get like Google it, you get half a day off on Friday to like go do on whatever you want. Like, how do you think about these things? And like, how do you capture that lightning in the bottle?
Oh man, it's many different factors. If they have an idea that is like peripherally related to our priorities, we make sure to like allocate time to that. And if there's momentum, like meaningful progress during that time, we'll pursue it. We'll add it to our priorities. It's very, I think the idea is to just be dynamic, not have like a process for that. Like, it's like, was that idea in that moment in time, is it worth pursuing? And if so, we will pursue it. And if it's getting us into like some corner and like taking us off track, we'll just cut our losses and get back to the priorities that were there before.
Okay, so it seems like the plan
I think the idea
is no plan.
Yes, in a way, actually.
And it helps actually to have a flat organization. As soon as you have layers, then it's hard to like have an idea and just start trying it, right? So I think it comes maybe to the structure of the company. By keeping it simple, people can actually be dynamic and say, hey, I'm going to try this for a little bit, go off, do it, happen. So yeah, I think the longest we can keep that as a company, I think the better. When you grow, actually, you can change the culture, right?
Yeah.
And that's also a thing that we have to think about as founders. As we grow, how do we maintain that culture at a larger scale?
Yeah. I got to also ask about time zone. Right?
Yeah.
You're all the way in paradise. Okay. That's code word for some tropical island in somewhere that Marvin's probably going to buy, someday. Maybe he already did. I don't know. Right. But that being said, Austin is Vardo's home, right? The team that I've had, like you mentioned earlier, some of them are in Argentina or in Patagonia, in the deep jungles there. We have someone who's going hard and like ripping off casinos in Vegas. I feel like Vardo just cracking up is probably like, that's actually not that far from the truth.
As of last night, we realized
he's on the black book, bro. He's not allowed in certain casinos. But like, you have these people all over in these different places, right? Like, how do you as a team, like in crypto, we all are decentralized, but you guys have, you're not a huge company, but you're not a small company. You have people in these other places. How do you manage this from the business side of things, from the engineering side of things? How do you guys think about it?
Yeah, so I think it's pros and cons, and I'm not gonna lie, it can be a struggle, right? So you could be too decentralized, and so that's something you have to be careful as a company, that you don't want to spread too thin. The advantage of decentralized, we can hire talent from everywhere, right? And some of our best engineers are like people we just find on Discord, we find on GitHub, and Messenger. These people don't have a LinkedIn profile. They were not even looking for a job, right? And so that's the beauty of our industry, is like we can just find talent, we see their code online, and we message them like, hey, do you want to work for Maestro? And so that's how we found people, and we're able to hire regardless of where they live. But then we have actually more recently tried to maybe bring kind of the time zones a bit more together. So we have the North America time zone, and then we have the Europe time zone. We're trying not to have an Asian time zone, because then that would actually be.
We hate the Asian world.
Yeah. If there's one thing that also I get from our walk and talks, is that how much Vardo hates Chinese people in India. It's clear. He's like, I cannot be in the same walk and talk with an Indian person. Why? It is really fun. Although he has a strange obsession with Indian and Chinese food. I don't know. Just can't accept it. No, but jokes aside, like it is really interesting. You guys are thinking about this, lumping these categories. And from a management perspective, and from an engineering perspective, you guys are thinking about product and sprints in terms of, I guess, like these siloed time zones. When you say, hey, we have sprints and epics for these time zones, we get it done, and then the next team syncs up. Is that the way you think about it, or?
Yeah, we make sure to have only the most important contributors in certain meetings, for example. They are there because they need to be there. I think that's one thing. Another thing is we're very clear about like what we want to accomplish, like as a company. Obviously, like we're thinking about new products and new directions to take. But as far as like what we have to work on right now, we're very clear on that. And then just like being there with them, I feel just even if their time zones are off, they're motivated to just like get things done and like stick to the mission and like communicate. So it's a lot of just many different factors you have to consider. And we're trying to figure out a way to get the whole team together every quarter, whether it be in Austin or somewhere. But there's ways to get around it. And as an infra company, it's a bit of a blessing in disguise because we need 24/7 uptime. So we do like a follow the sun on call schedule where like part of the team is, on call at my nighttime. And so and it's during their day. So no one has to stay up at night. So there's a bit of a blessing in disguise with this type of company.
Very cool. So I was going to ask about just the culture of the company and that kind of thing, because I think being all over the world, it's sometimes hard to do that. And I think things like this weekend, when you bring the whole team together as part of it, but how do you build the culture with everybody all over the place like that?
Yeah, I mean, it's an iterative process because we're also trying to figure out the culture ourselves, right? It's like an evolving beast dynamic. One cool thing in blockchain is conferences are huge, right? Like conferences is where everyone meets each other. So many times we actually met our team members for the first time because we're like, hey, let's go to this conference together. Finally get to like shake hands in person. So I think conferences have been a good way to like force to create like physical in-person meetings, on a regular basis around the world, and also meet our customers and our developers. And so I think conferences is just so much more than just listening to a talk. It's actually an opportunity to everyone to be in the same room together. So I think staying on the conference circuit has been a big one. And then, we have calls with everyone, we like all hands, and we try to be like as transparent as possible. So, whether it's products or engineering or operations of the nitty-gritty, we kind of share a lot. And I think when you're decentralized and remote, you need to lean on the oversharing kind of things, right? Because now you get people feel they're included, and maybe not everything is relevant, but at least they know what's going on, right? So what you don't want is people to become siloed or out of sync and then feel like they're out of touch with what's actually going on. So it is a lot of work to like share constantly, and sometimes it adds a bit of like extra work. But we use extensively Discord, and we're like, I step away from my computer and I come back and it's like 100 messages, right? So we overshare, we over communicate, and I think it's a way of like keep people.
We have a Discord like call room called War Room. It's an internal thing, and it's actually become pretty actively used. Anytime like we're in the middle of an integration or like a release or something intensive, everyone's like, it's like reaction, just jump into the war room. And then that's helped a lot. Another thing is like, given that people are all over the world and there are like these different cultures and different ways of like communicating, I found it's better to just be unapologetic and just like speak your mind. And yes, sometimes you might cross over and like rub someone the wrong way. But at least you put your idea out there. You didn't hide it because you're so afraid of, what would this person think? This unapologetic, ambitious, just get gravitating towards our mission and just like not being afraid to offend or whatever. It helps a lot with like keeping communications clear. And if there was something that you overdid, you just like talk about it.
Yeah,
that's cool. Who's the most inappropriate person on the team?
We name names.
Give them names. I shout out our guys all the time.
Marvin recently asked us what kind of swag would you guys like. And I suggested nipple rings.
Wait, who suggested this?
I did.
You did.
Inspired by you, yeah.
And now,
and tattoos.
Now we have to.
Now we have to do it. Yeah. That would be an interesting data feed. How many times is the nipple ring flung up and down? It's a data feed in Maestro's pipe. Basically, deep in.
Yeah, we won't charge for that one.
It has a very narrow market.
Yeah.
Sure, you wanted to get something out. What did you want to say, Vardo?
No.
You sure?
Okay. We have some rowdy guys.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Okay, good. Well, I mean, it seems like you guys have like a special team there. I know we talked about this. We're like well over time, but like, and then you need to balance.
No, we're good for now.
Okay. You mentioned one of the biggest hurdles in your company. And you talked about this very. And I think I like to talk about like wins and losses very publicly, right? Like, despite all the shenanigans, I think people who know me well, like, understand that, like, I'm just going to tell you what's happening. And I'm always honest about wins and losses. And I also appreciate you straight up just saying that, like, the bear market was hard for us. Like, we were teetering on bankruptcy. We had to make these uncomfortable decisions. Like, there's a lot of people who won't say that publicly, let alone just like say it in a room of like more than 3 people, shattered egos and shit. But it's cool that you're fucking sharing that with our audience. I got to ask, is there another place where you were like, holy shit, like I'm worried about this. You're like eating glass and like looking at the abyss and you're like, this is like almost or this was a failure for us, or this was like a near failure for us outside of that moment?
I think what's naturally a source of anxiety is just the volatility of this industry.
Yeah.
Right. And, we're builders and, we'll focus on technology, but it's hard not to look at like the price action. And it's been wild. Right. Yeah. And, people say, VCs are long-term people. They have these convictions, but you can have like this incredible discussion with this VC. You feel like you're like really connecting and you're on the same page and that you're like turning a page that they'll invest. And then the market crashes and then they just ghost you. Here, and you're like, oh shit, like if only I had closed, a week before, I could have, get a check from these VCs, and now, it's lost. Then you kind of like rethink on like, all these decisions. You're like, if only I had made a decision a bit before or a bit after, and you never know that this industry could like really send you direction. But like for 6 months, you're like, okay, well, the sentiment is so negative that we just have to buckle up and wait, and I'll try to fundraise, a bit later when things feel better. And so that's been kind of like the unpredictability and that uncertainty, especially for fundraising, which is such a critical piece, right, of what I need to do. It makes you realize like it's not all under your control and that there are all these other forces that can really throw a wrench. And so now we've learned that lesson is like, when things go well, like just go full throttle and really like ride positivity as much as you can, because you don't know that 2026, 2027, we'll be back to like the world is over, blockchain is dead.
Yeah.
You've got to buckle up and like just build.
You went from Austin 2025 offsite to like Pyongyang 2026 offsite with ramen noodles. It's a bear market, boys. We're taking whatever vacation package we can get. Yeah, I appreciate that. Like, I mean, I really do. Also, I got to ask before you chime in on this, because I know when I was at Denver, like I went to the Bitcoin Startup Lab incubator. I know you guys also work with the incubator and also the Draper incubator. You must talk to a lot of founders about raising, right? And each of them come ask me these questions about what it is. But like, I just think like this is a unique opportunity for me to ask you this question. So other founders who listen to this about like, what are the raise tricks that you use? Like, what have you guys found to be successful? I mean, obviously having a good product, good team, having all that stuff makes it easier. But what are things that you think that other founders don't realize, especially first-time founders who are just raising their pre-seeders, that you'd like to share?
I mean, the ugly truth is that investors are not as sophisticated as people think. And maybe because they're just not in the weeds, right? They're not technical people. They're much more like broad, macro, and they want to make a return, right? So you need to step away from the founder mindset, obsessed with product, and think you're building the best things in the sliced bread. And you have to put your shoes in these investors, which are very simple incentives, right? They have LP and investors that invest in their funds, and they need to invest that money within a certain amount of time and make as much return as possible. And especially at the pre-seed level, maybe you have a product, maybe you're pre-product, maybe you haven't got really product market fit. So especially early on, you have to tell a story. And in life, I think I realized that like having a good story for everything is extremely powerful. And for anything, you really need to think of your company as a story. And what is the story? What is the narrative that they can understand? I've done so many mistakes, early on. I've talked to hundreds of VCs, right? And I would go into the technicals, the technology, the engineering, and not realizing that, they want to know that I know what I'm doing. They're like, okay, you're an expert. Okay, you know what you're doing. But tell me the story. Why should I be excited about this? Some people maybe get this more naturally, but I think a lot of us more technical founders, we need to understand that it sells, and sales is about telling a compelling story and a simple story. Yeah. We tend to overcomplicate things. We try to like sell everything and see what sticks. And so simple, clear story where there is a clear upside for the investors. And as you get bigger and bigger, it's more about like your growth metrics, right? So you're like, okay, what are your KPIs? What is your revenue? And then you start putting more numbers kind of a data-driven kind of like forecasting company. But early on, is just tell the story, and that story can change, right? But you really need to like nail that down.
Was that question just in the context of pitching to investors or in general?
Well, like, I think the raised environment, yes, in terms of pitching, but in general, I just feel like, there's a lot of people at the Draper Incubator and the Bitcoin Startup Lab Incubator. I'm curious to see when they walk up to you and they say, because there's a lot of people that flooded me, because I'm sure there's a lot of people that flooded you guys at Denver. And what would you give them advice on this topic?
I would say don't be afraid to fire someone. If again, is it within this context of investing and incubating or?
Yeah, sure.
Okay. I don't have much. Marvin said it all.
Okay. Then
Sorry.
What is the context in which you're saying firing? Like, don't be afraid to fire.
They came to mind. It's like you have to be able to like let people go that aren't contributing meaningfully to the company. And that it's hard for us to do that because I would say we're kind and we want others to succeed. Like Marvin was saying earlier, like we want to bring the best out of people, but at some point you have to decide that this person can't be in your company. And that kind of rewires your brain a little bit. Yeah. Like getting yourself to be able to do that and do it quickly just changes you a little bit. And you have to not be afraid of that and like go into that mindset because the company is above you and it's above everyone else.
Yeah. I think those are super valuable insights. Okay, I've been too sane and rational. I have to say something irrational, please. I'm like on the edge of being like sounding like
you've been well behaved.
Yeah, I'm like I don't know what's happening today, guys. I apologize.
How are things with you?
No, I mean, like, I love to keep the topic on you guys. Okay, like, I also got to ask. Okay, like, you mentioned you cold DM Discord and GitHub engineers. That's fucking awesome. I've never thought about that. Who came up with that idea?
I mean, it just feels like, we're very practical. I think what also works for us is we're extremely practical. And like, if it makes sense, it makes sense. And I mean, also the same thing for our leads. Like most of our customers, it's like we find them on Twitter or Telegram, right? We don't go to LinkedIn and we like email outreach. That's why I mean, like these companies 2.0 is like, we're breaking the mold of like what all these other companies are doing. Like blockchain is so strange. Most of our customers are on Twitter and it's just like one message away to be like, hey, like, I think you would really like what we have. Like, let's chat. Yeah. And so in the same way that we hire on Discord, we also like do biz dev on Twitter and it's worked so far. So it's just, we do what works.
Well, specifically reaching out to GitHub is interesting because like when we started building the company, you're using a lot of like open source tools. You're on GitHub all the time, like looking for things that make sense for you to adopt or like deploy and scale. And so you see all these contributors, you're like, holy shit, these people just like for the fun of it, for shits and giggles, like built this amazing thing. And then once you get some momentum and you need to grow it or you need to expand that open source tool, it just naturally made sense to start reaching out to these contributors. We have like a long list, like a whole big sheet. We never hired a recruiter. Like we became recruiters. We have like this long like Google sheet of like GitHub or users for like different skill sets, anywhere from like cloud native computing foundation, like repos to like, UTXO, like indexing, APIs, a lot of degens. And those guys do not want to be like on LinkedIn. You're hoping there's an email like on their account. Wow. Anyway.
Yeah. So if you're contributing to open source, we're watching you.
Yeah. Well, I feel like next step is Maestro is going to start indexing GitHub repos. Right? So you're going to have like people will come to you for who are all the best devs in the world.
Actually, OpenQ does that. They're based out of Austin.
Very cool. So I was going to ask about the X recruiting because that I'm curious how you get through to some of these stuff. Because I will have folks reach out to me all the time, like you're interested in an opportunity, and like 9 out of 10 times they're a scam. So how do y'all? I mean, you probably have a verified account, and that probably helps us. How do you actually reach some of these folks and show them that you're legit and all that kind of stuff?
Well, I think the mistake that businesses do is they bring their same marketing that they use on like LinkedIn into X and they expect that it's just going to work. Like X values authenticity and individuality. So really be yourself. So I think my account is me and I'm sharing my opinion, talking with people as if they're human beings, not like your company or your founder. I'm like, oh, that's a great comment. And then you think about that. Or actually, that's that's a stupid idea, right? But you share your opinion, you have real discussion, and it feels like more genuine. And then we go to X spaces, right? We just join spaces, and if you've been to like crypto spaces, it can get pretty wild. It's just like a hot pot of just people from everywhere chatting, talking about stuff. Sometimes it's completely useless, and sometimes it's like the most amazing conversation between like top developers. And so then you create kind of like that social credit that people know you, and you build yourself a social network. And so then when you reach out, you're not a salesperson with a suit and tie reaching out. You're like actually the founder reaching out to another founder honestly and say like, hey, like, I would love to chat. And it doesn't always work, but I think it's like once you stop thinking that you're doing marketing and sales and you start realizing like you're just meeting people and you're coming as a person, I think it just feels very authentic. And I think that's the beauty of like social media and X. It's actually you move that layer of like formality and allow people to just be more like authentic.
I like that. So not like a recruiting department. You're just actively involved there, and as you find people that may be good fits, then you further the conversation. It's awesome.
I gotta ask, like, you talked about the next things for Maestro, so we don't have to rehash that unless you have more you wanted to add on that, right? But how do people get in touch with you guys? I mean, obviously, Vardo's you guys are going to be at the Red Rose between 9 and 3 a.m. tomorrow morning. Like, so got that. But like outside of that, how do people find you? How do people how do they slide into your DMs? How do they say, hey, I'm looking for a gig? Or it's like, hey, I have this crazy idea. Or, hey, we want you to work with us. Like, how do they get a hold of your team, you guys?
Yeah, so we're on 3 platforms. So we're on Twitter, on Telegram, and Discord. So you can find the link to these spaces on our website. Go to maestro.org. And we have just like a public channel. You can come in, say hi, and within 5 minutes, someone will reply to you, right? So just come say hi, and then have our community managers that are just there 24/7. I don't think they sleep ever because the speed of response is so fast. And it's that simple.
That's awesome. Questions?
Yeah, no, I think this has been great, guys. Really good getting to hang out in person, get to chat a little bit. But if folks want to connect with y'all individually, how do they find you on X, other platforms, that kind of thing?
Yeah, my name is on X is Marvin DeFi.
Okay.
Varderes _crypto.
Awesome. Very cool. And we'll link that in the show notes as well. So we'll get you there as well. But this has been great, guys. Thanks so much.
No, this is awesome. Thanks for guys coming in, man. And next year, Pyongyang 2026.
Let's do it.
Yeah.
Always a pleasure. Thank you, guys.
Thanks for tuning in to this episode of the ATX DAO Podcast. If you like what you heard, please rate, subscribe, and share the podcast with your friends and colleagues. To learn more about ATX DAO, visit us at atxdao.com and follow us on X, Farcaster, and LinkedIn at ATX DAO. Thanks again for listening, and we'll catch you in the next episode.